All right, we have some major news that took place late last night that you absolutely need to know about. And look, before I even get into the story, I have to point out that Donald Trump's weakness on the world stage has been exposed yet again. In the 2024 campaign and into his presidency, he has framed himself as a macho man who can get world leaders to bend the knee to him. That theory has fallen flat on its face time and time and time again, just like it did last night. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel, drop a like on the video, comment, let me know what you think about this story. We're so close to 300,000 subscribers on this channel, which is just mind-blowing. But without further ado, let's dive in. We learned last night that Russian drones had violated the airspace of Poland, a NATO country, a close US ally. And as you can see in this article from CNN, Polish military accuses Moscow of an act of aggression after shooting down Russian drones in its airspace. This is incredibly important. Obviously, Poland is a NATO country, and it's important to remember that in Article 5 of NATO, it states that an attack on one is an attack on all. And while Poland wasn't necessarily attacked last night, we got scarily close. And this is all happening under Donald Trump. So let me break down this story for you and give you the specifics. Poland's military said early Wednesday that it had shot down drones that violated its airspace during a Russian attack on neighboring Ukraine in what is potentially a major provocation for Europe. Quote, "This is an act of aggression that posed a real threat to the safety of our citizens," said Poland's Operation Command in a post on X Tuesday morning. This is a really significant statement when you're talking about a major country like Russia, calling it an act of aggression, saying it posed a threat to the safety of our citizens. I mean, that to me kind of seems like Poland is appealing to NATO, as they should. NATO is a terrific organization. It's been incredibly successful. But it's a pretty significant statement to be making when you're talking about Russia. And I think that means that the intel they have behind the scenes is probably more significant than the intel that we have in the public. Prime Minister Donald Tusk of Poland confirmed a military response operation was underway, quote, related to multiple violations of Polish airspace, and said the military has used weapons against the objects. So the Prime Minister of Poland confirmed that Poland shot down these drones. That has been 100% confirmed. Poland is, of course, a member of the NATO alliance, a transatlantic defense pact involving the United States that employs the principle that an attack on one is an attack on all. The defense minister in Poland said it was in constant contact with NATO command and, quote, territorial defense forces have been activated for ground searches of downed drones. And this is what I mean, that when they made this statement that this is an act of aggression that posed a real threat to the safety of our citizens, I think that's an appeal to NATO. And it's a message to Russia that, hey, you better back off. You better back off. You cannot violate our airspace and get away with it. We have this thing called NATO where we have some major countries, Germany, France, the United Kingdom, the USA, when we want to be, because Donald Trump is in office. He hates NATO, unfortunately. That's a significant pact. So if Russia wants to violate the airspace of Poland, continue to provoke Poland or NATO countries, there has to be a response of some kind. And I think that's what Poland is kind of saying here with a lot of the statements they've put out. Now, I just want to remind everybody the circumstances of what we're looking at right now, which is this is all taking place, Russia violating Poland's airspace and further attacks, which we'll talk about in just a second, just around 2 weeks after Donald Trump literally rolled out the red carpet for Putin. He had military service members in the United States of America rolling out a red carpet for a murderous dictator. And then Donald Trump stood at the end of that red carpet, clapping like a seal for Vladimir Putin, his best buddy who he was reuniting with after years. I mean, it's so humiliating for the United States. And Trump at this conference talked a big talk. He said, we're going to get a deal done. And now Poland's airspace has been violated. And reporters tried to get Donald Trump to talk about what happened in Poland, and they were unsuccessful. He just completely ignored the question. Take a look.
Yep, you're good. Thank you.
Mr. President, any response to Russia? Mr. President, what about Russian drones getting into Polish airspace tonight?
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not like he didn't hear the question. The reporter did a fantastic job of staying persistent. It's not like Trump didn't hear the question. It's not like JD Vance or Marco Rubio or any of the people that were with Donald Trump last night didn't hear the question. They heard it just fine. And Donald Trump chose to ignore them. And I think this point by Olga Lotman, a journalist who has a focus on Ukrainian foreign policy, made a very good point, which is Trump Hegseth Rubio left the restaurant over 2 hours after reports of drones in Poland and NATO scrambling jets. Imagine any other president or defense secretary doing this. Imagine that. Imagine if Joe Biden was just hanging out with Secretary Blinken during his presidency in a restaurant in DC, ordering how many hundreds of thousands of, or I should say hundreds or thousands of dollars worth of food at this restaurant, just having a fun time. Meanwhile, there's a major foreign policy event and they were nowhere to be seen. Republicans would be freaking out. But since it's Donald Trump whining and dining with his buddies at a restaurant, they don't care. It's a complete double standard from MAGA. And again, I do want to reiterate that while all of this was taking place and even after, Russia then continued to launch missiles at Ukraine. This was a map shortly after we learned about the story in Poland. And as you can see, the red indicates that there's a threat in that area. This was all taking place while Donald Trump was sitting at a restaurant. And I think aside from the insanity of this story, which is Russia violating a sovereign country's airspace, the response from Donald Trump being quite literally non-existent, it's also worth pointing out that throughout the entire campaign, throughout Biden's entire presidency, Republicans told us that Joe Biden was weak and that he was going to get us into a world war, and now the opposite is happening. Donald Trump said he was going to come in and basically bully these leaders, Putin and people like that. The opposite is happening. They are bullying him. Under Joe Biden, we were respected. Poland's airspace wasn't violated. This stuff didn't happen. Under Donald Trump, it's happening pretty consistently in the ways that other countries are just pushing the United States around. Just take a look at this clip of Donald Trump during the campaign talking about Ukraine specifically, indicating that Biden has been weak and that if he stays in office, there would be more escalation.
We have never been closer to World War III than we are today under Joe Biden. A global conflict between nuclear-armed powers would mean death and destruction on a scale unmatched in human history. It would be nuclear Armageddon. Nothing is more important than avoiding that nightmare. We will avoid it, but we need new leadership. Every day this proxy battle in Ukraine continues, we risk global war. We must be absolutely clear that our objective is to immediately have a total cessation of hostilities. All shooting has to stop.
Yeah, it's worked out really well in Trump's term. He said he'd get it done in 24 hours. The opposite has happened. And in this video, he was just talking total crap. I mean, he's like, Joe Biden's going to get us into World War III. We've never been closer. Meanwhile, Joe Biden actually secured a bunch of peace deals during his presidency, especially in the Middle East at the end of his presidency. Joe Biden was the peace president. Donald Trump had more drone strikes in his first term, significantly more than Joe Biden. Donald Trump had more American troops dying abroad than Joe Biden. Donald Trump was the war president. Biden was the peace president. Trump tried to argue the opposite. He tried to argue in this video that we just saw that if Biden were to stay in office, things would get worse. Things in Eastern Europe, things in the Middle East, around the world have only gotten worse in terms of conflict and peace. And it wasn't just Donald Trump kind of making this argument that Biden was going to lead us to war and he would lead us to peace. MAGA influencers were doing the exact same thing. And tonight, with everything going on, or I should say this morning, with everything going on in Poland, they're silent. They're not talking about World War III. For example, Charlie Kirk uplifted a post or a comment from Scott Pressler saying any young person that chooses to vote for Joe Biden this November is voting for himself or herself to be shipped overseas to fight his wars. A vote for Biden is a vote for war. A vote for Trump is a vote for peace. How many times does this need to be debunked? Whether it be Donald Trump bombing Iran or Russia violating Poland's airspace under Donald Trump not getting any progress on the Russia-Ukraine war. How many times does this need to be debunked? How many? This is the worst quote I've ever seen in hindsight. We knew it to be BS at the time, but especially everything that's happened with Trump's term, it's gotten even worse. What about Gunther Eagleman? The last one I want to show you. In 2023, all the way back then, I did some digging saying Joe Biden and the neocons are taking us into World War III. Remember, there were no new wars under Donald Trump. Trump just, continued a bunch of the wars that we were already in, but I digress. No need to litigate that any further. But this is the position. That was the position of MAGA. Now tonight they are silent. They are silent with stories like this. It's no longer we're going into World War III. It's Donald Trump is a foreign policy tactician who's going to solve everything. It's such disgusting hypocrisy. And I think that's something that we need to talk about in relation to this story. So I just had to bring you the news. It's obviously very urgent, but I'll leave the video there. Thank you so much for watching. It really means the world. Make sure to subscribe down below. It goes such an incredibly long way. Drop a like on the video, comment, let me know what you think about the story. And as I always say, I greatly appreciate you, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.